The morning shift on Luna Station began like any other. Admiral Taemin Park stood in the observation deck watching Earth rise over the lunar horizon. The blue marble looked peaceful from here, but Park knew better. Down there, factories worked day and night building ships for humanity's small but growing space fleet. Park was 52 years old and had spent half his life preparing for a war that might never come. The Galactic Council maintained peace across 17 star systems. 300 years of cooperation between different alien species had created the most stable civilization the galaxy had ever known. Humanity was the newest member, discovered only 50 years ago by Villani trade scouts. The humans were still learning their place in this vast community. Their ships were simple compared to alien technology. While other species used energy shields and quantum drives, human vessels relied on thick metal armor and nuclear engines. The entire Earth defense fleet consisted of only 12 ships. The Villani Empire alone had over 300 vessels patrolling their trade routes. Dr. Hee-Jin Lee worked in the research section 3 levels below the command center. She was 38 and one of the few humans who had learned to speak 4 different alien languages. Today she was reviewing reports that made her stomach feel cold. Star systems were going silent across the outer rim of the galaxy. The pattern was always the same. First, communication would stop. Then trade ships would fail to arrive. Finally, scout vessels would find empty space where thriving civilizations once existed. No wreckage, no survivors, no explanation. Lee pulled up the latest report on her screen. The Kepler 442 system had housed over 2 billion Morvac gas dwellers just 3 months ago. Now it was completely empty. The planets remained in their orbits, but every trace of civilization had vanished. Captain Sora Kim commanded the reconnaissance ship Swift Arrow. At 31, she was the youngest captain in the Earth fleet. Her crew of 22 had drawn the dangerous job of investigating the disappearances. Kim preferred action to sitting in meetings, but what they kept finding made no sense. "Captain, we're approaching the coordinates of the Morvac mining station," reported Lieutenant Hyun-woo. "Bay from the navigation console. Sensors show nothing but empty space." Kim leaned forward in her command chair. 3 days earlier, automated systems had detected massive energy readings from this location. Industrial mining operations that had run continuously for 70 years had simply stopped. "Full sensor sweep, look for debris, energy traces, anything." The bridge fell silent as the crew worked. Kim watched the main display show absolutely nothing where a station the size of a small city should have been. The asteroids the Morvac had been mining were still there. The station and all its inhabitants had vanished. "Captain," called Ensign Yu-Jin Oh from the science station. "I'm detecting something unusual in the asteroid field. It's metallic but not matching any known materials in our database." "Put it on screen." A twisted piece of metal appeared on the main display. It was roughly the size of a shuttle but seemed to shift and flow like liquid. Strange symbols covered its surface, pulsing with a faint blue light. "That's not Morvac technology," Kim said quietly. "Or any technology I recognize. Prepare a recovery team." Back on Luna Station, Admiral Park received Kim's report with growing concern. The mysterious object was the first physical evidence they had found at any of the disappearance sites. He called an emergency meeting with Earth's top scientists and military officers. "The object appears to be some kind of communication device," Dr. Lee explained to the assembled group. "The symbols are unlike anything in our xenolinguistic databases. The power source is completely unknown to us." Major Dong-Wook Choi, commander of Earth's Marine Forces, studied the images. At 45, he had trained for every type of combat scenario except the one they now faced. "Has anyone considered that these disappearances might be connected? That we're looking at evidence of an attack?" "By whom?" asked Park. "The Galactic Council has detailed records of every known species. None of them have this level of technology." "Maybe they're not from our galaxy," Lee suggested quietly. The room fell silent. The idea that threats might exist beyond their known space was something the Galactic Council had never seriously considered. They had spent centuries assuming that their 17-system civilization represented the peak of development in their region of space. Ambassador Yu Na-shin arrived from Nexus Prime with more disturbing news. At 43, she was Earth's senior representative to the Galactic Council. The emergency session she had just attended revealed that other species were finally admitting to their own investigations. The Villani have lost contact with 6 systems along their border, Shin reported. The Thek Collective has run probability calculations. They estimate that whatever is causing this will reach the core systems within 18 months, if the pattern continues. What's their response plan? Park asked. They don't have one. The major powers keep insisting this must be some kind of natural phenomenon. They refuse to consider that an unknown hostile force might be involved. Dr. Lee had been working around the clock to decode the mysterious device. Finally, she achieved a breakthrough. The symbols weren't writing in any traditional sense. They were quantum encrypted memory storage. When properly decoded, they contained the final transmission of a dying species. The message was brief, but terrifying. A voice speaking in a language that universal translators could barely process described creatures that consumed not just matter, but the very essence of technological civilization. The beings came from beyond the galactic rim in ships that were somehow alive. They fed on refined metals and complex electronics, growing stronger with each world they devoured. We abandoned our cities and fled to the mountains, the alien voice whispered through static. But it was too late. They found us. They found everything. Our technology betrayed us. The more advanced we were, the easier we were to locate and consume. Only those who returned to the old ways had any chance of survival. The transmission ended with sounds that might have been weapons fire, or might have been something much worse. 3 days later, long-range sensors detected what Captain Kim had been dreading. A massive fleet was approaching from beyond the galactic rim. The ships were unlike anything in any database. They appeared to be organic, grown rather than built. Each vessel was larger than the biggest known dreadnoughts. Park stood in the command center, watching the sensor display with a cold feeling in his chest. He counted over 2,000 contacts, and more were appearing every hour. Whatever these creatures were, they had come in force. Send an emergency message to the Galactic Council, he ordered. Tell them the war has begun. The great question was whether humanity's primitive ships and simple weapons would be useless against these cosmic predators, or whether their very simplicity might offer the one advantage that advanced civilizations had lost. The answer would determine not just the fate of Earth, but the survival of 17 star systems and trillions of living beings. Outside the observation windows, Earth continued its ancient rotation, unaware that its children among the stars were about to face the greatest test in human history. The war for the galaxy was coming, and only time would tell if humanity's courage would be enough to stand against the darkness between the stars. The emergency session of the Galactic Council took place on Nexus Prime, the diplomatic heart of known civilization. Representatives from 12 major species gathered in the great crystal dome that had hosted peaceful negotiations for 3 centuries. Today, the atmosphere was anything but peaceful. Admiral Tae-Min Park arrived aboard the human transport vessel Harmony, one of only 3 ships Earth could spare for the journey. As he walked through the magnificent corridors of the council building, alien dignitaries whispered among themselves. Some pointed at his simple uniform with what looked like amusement. The council chamber itself was a marvel of alien architecture. Floating platforms accommodated species that breathed different atmospheres. Translation matrices allowed dozens of languages to be understood simultaneously. The technology required to make such meetings possible represented the peak of galactic civilization. War Prince Zephon of the Villani Empire stood 12 feet tall, his crystalline armor reflecting the chamber's lights. His species had dominated interstellar trade for 200 years through superior technology and economic power. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. The approaching fleet numbers over 3,000 vessels, Zephon announced. Our analysis indicates each ship is at least twice the size of our largest dreadnoughts. However, their technology appears primitive. No energy shields, no quantum communications, no faster-than-light capabilities that we can detect. A representative of the Thek Collective, a being that looked like living crystal, provided additional data. Probability calculations suggest these creatures use biological technology. Their ships appear to be grown rather than manufactured. This presents unknown variables that make tactical planning difficult. Ambassador Yuna Shin sat in the human delegation section, one of the smallest groups present. She had learned to speak carefully in these meetings. Humanity's voice carried little weight compared to species with centuries of galactic experience. "What about first contact protocols?" she asked. "Has anyone attempted communication with these ships?" The chamber fell silent. Finally, General Vex of the Altarian military spoke. His people had the most advanced combat fleet in known space. 3 diplomatic vessels approached the alien formation 2 days ago. All 3 were destroyed before they could transmit their peaceful intentions. The destruction was total. No survivors, no debris. Park felt his stomach tighten. The aliens had made their intentions clear without saying a word. This was not going to be resolved through negotiation. Meanwhile, light years away, Captain So-Ra, Kim was preparing for the most dangerous mission of her career. The Swift Arrow had been modified with the most advanced stealth systems available, borrowed from 3 different alien species. Her job was to observe the approaching fleet without being detected. "Remember, we are invisible only if we remain completely passive," Kim told her crew. "No active sensors, no communications, no energy signatures above background levels. We watch and we learn." The Swift Arrow drifted through space using minimal power. Kim watched the main screen as the alien fleet came into view. What she saw made her question everything she thought she knew about spaceship design. The vessels were not ships in any traditional sense. They were living creatures, massive and organic, swimming through space like whales through an ocean. Their surfaces rippled with movement. Smaller organisms flew between the larger ones like parasites or perhaps offspring. "Captain," whispered Lieutenant Bay, "sensor readings are impossible. These creatures are generating their own gravity fields. They're bending space around themselves to move faster than light should allow." Kim studied the formations. The creatures showed clear signs of intelligence and organization. Larger specimens surrounded smaller ones in protective patterns. Scout creatures moved ahead of the main group, testing space for dangers or obstacles. "How many total?" she asked. "At least 4,000, Captain. And more are arriving every hour. It's like they're emerging from somewhere outside our galaxy entirely." Back on Earth, Dr. Hyojin Lee was working with a team of xenobiologists to understand the alien device they had recovered. The more they learned, the more frightened they became. The quantum storage contained not just one message, but thousands. Final transmissions from dozens of different species across multiple galaxies. "They're not from our universe," Lee explained to Admiral Park during a secure communication session. "These creatures exist in the space between galaxies. They feed on technological civilizations, consuming not just matter but somehow absorbing the knowledge and capabilities of every species they encounter." "How is that possible?" Park asked. "We're still trying to understand. But the evidence suggests they can directly convert complex technology into biological energy. The more advanced a civilization, the more nutrition they provide. It's like they're cosmic predators specifically evolved to hunt technological species." The implications were horrifying. Every advancement that made galactic civilization possible also made them more vulnerable to these creatures. Faster than light travel, energy weapons, artificial intelligence, all of it could potentially be turned against its creators. Major Dongwook Choi was reviewing tactical reports when the first real engagement occurred. The Galactic Defense Fleet had assembled near the border systems, over 8,000 vessels representing the combined military might of known civilization. It was the largest war fleet ever assembled. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. The alien creatures used weapons that manipulated gravity itself. Sophisticated energy shields collapsed under gravitational stress. Advanced targeting computers failed when the enemy could bend space to redirect incoming fire. Entire battleships were crushed like tin cans when gravity waves focused on their hulls. Of the 8,000 ships that entered the engagement, fewer than 300 escaped. The survivors brought reports of technology so advanced it seemed like magic. The creatures had not just won, they had consumed the destroyed vessels. growing visibly larger with each ship they devoured. Captain Kim watched the battle from her hidden position and saw something that made her blood run cold. The creatures were learning. During the fight, she observed them adapting their tactics in real time. Weapons that worked initially became less effective as the battle progressed. By the end, the aliens were anticipating every move the galactic forces made. "They're not just consuming our technology," she whispered to her crew. "They're absorbing our knowledge. Every ship they destroy makes them smarter." The Swift Arrow retreated to a safe distance using emergency protocols. Kim's report to Admiral Park contained the most terrifying intelligence of all. The creatures were not just invaders, they were evolvers. Each victory made them more dangerous than before. On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council met an emergency session again. The mood had changed completely. Representatives who had been confident in their technological superiority now spoke in whispers about evacuation plans. The great crystal dome that had symbolized galactic unity now felt like a trap waiting to be sprung. War Prince Zephon's armor no longer gleamed with confidence. "Our most advanced weapons are useless against them. Our shields provide no protection. Our ships are too sophisticated, too easy for them to track and destroy." The Thek Collective representative provided the final devastating analysis. Probability of successful defense using conventional methods approaches zero. Survival requires abandoning all advanced technology and reverting to pre-spaceflight civilization levels. In that moment of despair, all eyes turned to the human delegation. Admiral Park stood slowly, feeling the weight of every gaze in the chamber. Humanity's primitive ships and simple weapons had been objects of gentle mockery for 50 years. Now they represented the galaxy's only hope. "Maybe," Park said quietly. "It's time to fight like humans." Admiral Taemin Park stood before the assembled representatives of 12 alien species. The great council chamber that had once echoed with confident debates now felt heavy with fear. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy were looking to humanity for salvation, and Park knew the terrible irony of their situation. "We need to understand what makes these creatures vulnerable," Park began. "Every species they have consumed shared one thing in common: advanced technology. The more sophisticated the civilization, the more completely they were destroyed." War Prince Zephon shifted uncomfortably in his crystalline armor. "Are you suggesting we abandon 3 centuries of technological progress? Return to primitive conditions like savages?" "I'm suggesting we learn from survivors," Park replied calmly. He activated a holographic display showing data that Dr. Lee had compiled. Every attack site contains traces of populations that survived by abandoning technology entirely. Cave dwellers, Stone Age communities, people who lived like their ancient ancestors. The Thek Collective representative processed this information with clicking sounds. Survival probability increases dramatically when technological signatures drop below detectable levels. However, this would reduce our species to pre-spaceflight conditions. "Not all of us," Park said, "but some of us. Enough to preserve our knowledge and cultures until we find a better solution." Back on Luna Station, engineer Ji-Ho Nam was working 18-hour shifts in the research laboratories. The 34-year-old had spent his entire career designing advanced weapon systems. Now he was learning to build devices that his grandfather might have recognized. "The key is simplicity," Nam explained to his mixed team of human and alien engineers. "These creatures feed on complex energy patterns and sophisticated materials, but they seem to have trouble processing radioactive elements and simple kinetic weapons." On his workbench lay the prototype for what would become known as the Liberation Gun. It looked like something from Earth's ancient past, a simple tube that used explosive powder to launch projectiles. But the projectiles contained uranium cores, and the powder was enhanced with chemical compounds that produced no electronic signatures. Dr. Hae-Jin Lee had made another disturbing discovery while analyzing data from consumed worlds. The creatures didn't just destroy civilizations, they studied them. Each attack made them smarter and more adaptable. They were learning the weaknesses of every known technology in the galaxy. "They're building a database," Lee explained to Park. during their daily briefing. Every ship they consume, every weapon they encounter, every defense system they overcome, all of it gets added to their collective knowledge. They're becoming immune to our standard tactics. What about our tactics? Park asked. Human warfare principles? They have no data on human military history. 50 years isn't long enough for them to have studied our approaches to combat. We might actually have an advantage there. Captain So-Ra Kim received new orders that made her both proud and terrified. She was being given command of the first integrated fleet, combining human ships with alien crews willing to fight using primitive weapons. Her new flagship was the Indomitable, a vessel that represented everything wrong and right about human engineering. The Indomitable was built like a metal fortress, thick armor plating instead of energy shields, nuclear reactors instead of quantum cores, mechanical computers instead of artificial intelligence. Other species had considered it hopelessly backward. Now it was the template for survival. Strip out every advanced system, Kim ordered her engineering teams. If it uses quantum mechanics, remove it. If it requires computer processing above basic calculation, get rid of it. If it can be tracked by sophisticated sensors, tear it out. The work was heartbreaking for alien crew members who had to watch their technological marvels being reduced to scrap metal. But they understood the necessity. Sophisticated equipment made them targets. Simple tools made them invisible. Major Dong-Wook Choi was training the first integrated ground forces in human combat techniques. Aliens who had never held physical weapons were learning to use crossbows and explosive charges. Species that had fought wars using orbital bombardment were practicing hand-to-hand combat. Forget everything you know about modern warfare, Choi told a group of Villani warriors. These creatures expect us to fight with energy weapons and guided missiles. We're going to fight with clubs and fire. The first test of human tactics came in the Centauri system. 3 alien creatures had established themselves in orbit around Alpha Centauri b, feeding on the remains of a mining colony. Captain Kim's fleet approached using ballistic trajectories and radio silence, looking like space debris on any sophisticated sensor system. All ships prepare nuclear torpedoes, Kim ordered through mechanical communication systems. Remember, we get one chance at surprise, make it count. The attack was brutal and primitive. Nuclear weapons launched from simple tubes, following predictable physics rather than guided flight paths. The creatures, expecting sophisticated targeting systems and energy weapons, were caught completely unprepared. 2 of the 3 creatures died in the first salvo. The third began to adapt, but human tactics didn't rely on technology it could learn to counter. Kim's ships used ramming attacks and self-destruct charges, methods no advanced civilization would consider acceptable losses. Target destroyed, reported Lieutenant Bay. All 3 creatures eliminated with minimal casualties. It was the first major victory against the invaders, and news spread quickly through the surviving populations. Hope began to replace despair, as word spread that the creatures could be killed. Ambassador Shin coordinated the massive refugee effort as billions of beings abandoned their homeworlds for hidden colonies in remote systems. The social upheaval was enormous, but it represented the galaxy's only strategy for long-term survival. We're not just relocating populations, Shin explained to the Emergency Council. We're preserving the knowledge and culture of entire civilizations, in forms that won't attract the creatures' attention. Libraries carved in stone, scientific principles taught through oral tradition, art preserved in cave paintings. Dr. Lee established communication networks with survivor groups on dozens of consumed worlds. These forgotten ones had learned to live without any technology more advanced than fire and simple tools. Their experiences provided crucial intelligence about creature behavior and weaknesses. They ignore anything that doesn't register as technological, reported one survivor through a message carried by mechanical relay systems. We've been living in caves for months, using stone weapons and wooden tools. The creatures fly overhead, constantly but never investigate. To them, we don't exist. The galaxy was learning a harsh lesson about the relationship between progress and survival. Advanced civilizations had become so dependent on their technology that they had forgotten how to exist without it. Now they had to remember skills their ancestors had taken for granted. Engineer Nam's workshops were producing thousands of simple weapons designed to kill creatures that fed on sophistication. Crossbows that launched uranium bolts, catapults that hurled nuclear charges, swords made from radioactive metals that could cut through organic armor. The irony was not lost on anyone. The most advanced species in the galaxy were arming themselves with weapons that would have been familiar to medieval warriors. But these primitive tools, enhanced with carefully chosen materials, were proving more effective than energy cannons and particle beams. As Part 3 ended, the war entered a new phase. Humanity had proven that the creatures could be defeated, but victory required sacrifice. Entire civilizations would have to abandon their technological heritage to survive. The question now was whether they could adapt quickly enough to avoid extinction. 6 months after the victory at Centauri, the war had changed completely. Both sides were adapting to new realities, but the creatures were learning faster than anyone had expected. Engineer Ji-Ho Nam stared at the wreckage of the defense station, at Wolf 359, trying to understand how the enemy had countered their latest weapons. "They're evolving their defenses," Nam reported to Admiral Park through a mechanical communication system that used mirrors and light signals. "The uranium projectiles that worked so well before are now being deflected by some kind of biological armor. They're developing immunity to our attacks." Park studied the damage reports from a dozen recent engagements. Human tactics were still effective, but each victory cost more ships and more lives. The creatures were adapting their biological systems to counter every weapon humanity deployed. "How long before they become completely immune to our methods?" Park asked. "At their current rate of adaptation, maybe 8 months. Maybe less." Dr. Hai-Jin Lee was working with survivor groups across the galaxy to develop new forms of resistance. The most successful communities had learned to fight using methods that avoided any detectable patterns. They struck without warning using weapons that changed with each attack. "The key is unpredictability," Lee explained to a gathering of resistance, leaders in a cave system on the planet Kepler 186F. "The creatures learn by observing our tactics. If we never use the same approach twice, they can't develop effective counters." She had learned to communicate using drum codes and smoke signals, ancient human methods that left no electronic traces. The resistance network now spanned 40 star systems, coordinating through techniques that would have been familiar to Stone Age tribes. Captain So-Ra Kim was discovering the true horror of fighting an enemy that consumed knowledge. During the Battle of Vega Prime, her fleet had successfully destroyed a small group of creatures using coordinated ram attacks. But the dying creatures had somehow transmitted their experiences to others in their species. The next engagement went completely differently, Kim reported to her crew after barely escaping a trap near the Altair system. "They knew exactly what we were going to do. They had adapted their formations to counter ramming attacks before we even began our approach." The creatures were not just individuals, but part of a collective intelligence that shared information instantly across vast distances. Every human victory taught them how to defeat similar attacks in the future. Major Dongwook Choi was leading ground operations on partially consumed worlds, fighting creatures that had learned to anticipate human tactics. The enemy no longer ignored primitive weapons. They had developed biological countermeasures for crossbows, catapults, and even hand-to-hand combat techniques. "They're studying us just like we studied them," Choi explained to his mixed force of human marines and alien volunteers. "The difference is, they can modify their bodies to counter our weapons. We have to keep changing our entire approach to war." His latest innovation was the use of biological weapons derived from Earth's most dangerous organisms. Viruses and bacteria that the creatures had never encountered proved effective, but only until they developed immunity. Each biological attack worked exactly once. The Battle of Wolf 359 became the turning point of the war, but not in the way anyone expected. A massive creature, larger than any previously encountered, had established itself in the system's asteroid belt. Intelligence suggested it was some kind of breeding facility, producing smaller creatures at an alarming rate. "This might be our chance to capture one of their command organisms," Dr. Lee suggested during the mission briefing. If we can study their biological systems directly, we might find weaknesses they can't adapt away from. The assault force consisted of 300 ships using purely mechanical systems. No computers, no electronic communications, no energy weapons. They approached the asteroid belt like an ancient naval battle, using visual signals and predetermined attack patterns. Captain Kim commanded the lead squadron aboard the Indomitable. Her ship had been further modified with the most primitive weapon systems ever mounted on a starship. Ballistae that launched nuclear spears, trebuchets that hurled antimatter charges. Systems so simple they couldn't be hacked or corrupted by the enemy. The battle lasted for 3 days. The creatures fought with desperate intelligence, adapting their defenses in real time. But human unpredictability kept them off balance. Just when they countered one attack method, the humans switched to something completely different. Major Choi led the boarding action against the command creature, using techniques that would have been familiar to pirates from Earth's ancient oceans. His Marines wore metal armor and carried weapons that worked through simple mechanical principles. They cut their way into the creature's body using tools that predated spaceflight by thousands of years. Inside the command creature, they discovered something that changed their understanding of the war. The organic chambers contained not just biological systems but technological components from dozens of different species. The creatures were not just consuming technology, they were incorporating it into their own bodies. They're building themselves into perfect weapons, Choi reported through a mechanical communication device. Every species they destroy makes them stronger and more adaptable. They're not just learning our tactics, they're becoming us. The boarding party managed to plant nuclear charges throughout the creature's vital organs before retreating. The Yai explosion not only destroyed the command organism, but also sent shockwaves through the entire enemy fleet. Other creatures in the system began behaving erratically, as if they had lost some crucial guidance. "We've identified a weakness," Dr. Lee announced after analyzing the battle data. "The creatures operate through hierarchical command structures. Destroy the command organisms, and the others become confused and vulnerable." But the victory came at a terrible cost. Of the 300 ships that began the assault, only 47 survived. The creatures had learned to focus their attacks on human vessels, recognizing them as the primary threat to their expansion. Ambassador Shin was coordinating refugee efforts across the galaxy when the most disturbing news arrived. Long-range sensors had detected movement in the space between galaxies. Massive formations of creatures were approaching from multiple directions, drawn by the ongoing conflict. "The war we've been fighting is just the advance force," Shin reported to the Emergency Council. "The main invasion hasn't even begun yet. There are millions of creatures on their way, maybe billions." The galactic economy had completely collapsed. Trade routes were abandoned, manufacturing centers destroyed, entire sectors evacuated to primitive colonies that could survive undetected. Trillions of beings were learning to live without any technology more advanced than fire and simple tools. Engineer Dam was working around the clock to develop weapons that could be manufactured without sophisticated industrial systems. His latest designs could be built in caves using materials found on any planet. Stone hammers embedded with radioactive fragments, wooden spears tipped with toxic compounds, armor made from treated animal hides and metal plates. "We're not just fighting a war," Nam explained to his team. "We're preparing for a complete collapse of technological civilization. If we lose, the survivors will need tools they can make with their own hands." The resistance movement had evolved into something that would have been unrecognizable to the advanced civilizations that created it. Fighters who once commanded starships now led cavalry charges using animals bred for war. Scientists who had unlocked the secrets of quantum mechanics now made gunpowder in primitive laboratories. Captain Kim received the orders she had been dreading. Earth itself had become a target, and the largest creature force ever detected was moving toward the Sol system. Humanity would have to choose between defending their homeworld and continuing the galactic resistance effort. "We can't hold both fronts," Admiral Park explained during their final briefing on Luna Station. "If we concentrate our forces to defend Earth, the resistance movement will collapse. If we abandon Earth to save the galaxy, we lose the source of everything that makes us human. The decision would define not just the outcome of the war, but the future of human civilization itself. In the distance, Earth turned peacefully on its axis, unaware that its children among the stars were preparing for the ultimate test of courage and sacrifice. As Part 4 ended, the creatures were approaching Earth with a force large enough to consume entire star systems. Humanity had learned to fight them, but the enemy had learned to fight back. The final battle would determine whether primitive courage could triumph over adaptive intelligence, or whether the galaxy would fall to creatures that grew stronger with every victory they achieved. Admiral Taemin Park stood in the command center of Luna Station, watching the tactical display show humanity's final gamble. Every available ship from across the galaxy was converging on the Sol system. 300 vessels against an enemy force that numbered in the tens of thousands. All evacuation transports have cleared Earth orbit, reported Captain Yan-Su Han from the communication station. Civilian populations are being relocated to the prepared colonies in remote systems. Park nodded grimly. The evacuation had taken 6 months, moving 12 billion people to hidden settlements that use no technology more advanced than water wheels and windmills. It was the largest refugee operation in galactic history, and it might not be enough. Engineer Ji Ho Nam had spent those 6 months turning the Sol system into the ultimate fortress. Asteroids had been hollowed out and filled with primitive weapons that relied on chemical explosives and mechanical triggers. The asteroid belt was now a minefield that could be activated by human crews, using nothing more sophisticated than flint and steel. The creatures will expect energy weapons and guided missiles, Nam explained to the assembled fleet commanders. Instead, they're going to face stone catapults launching nuclear warheads and crossbows firing antimatter bolts. Every weapon system is mechanical. Every targeting system is visual. Every trigger is pulled by a human hand. Dr. Hai Jin Lee had made one final breakthrough that might give them an edge. Deep in the captured data from destroyed creatures, she had found evidence of their greatest weakness. The collective intelligence that made them so adaptable also made them vulnerable to coordinated psychological attacks. They share a hive mind connection, Lee explained to the War Council. If we can overload that connection with contradictory information, we might be able to confuse their coordination systems. The trick is making them think they're facing multiple different enemies simultaneously. Captain So-Ra Kim reviewed the battle plan from the bridge of the Indomitable. Her ship would lead the first wave of attacks using ramming tactics and self-destruct charges. The second wave would employ long-range ballistic weapons. The third wave would use biological warfare, agents. Each approach would look completely different to enemy sensors. The goal isn't to win, Kim told her crew. The goal is to make them think they're fighting 3 separate species with completely different technologies. If we can overload their adaptation systems, they won't be able to counter all our attacks simultaneously. Major Dongwook Choi was preparing the ground defenses on Earth itself. Massive tunnels had been dug beneath major cities, connected by networks that would allow defenders to move without detection. The tunnels contained weapons that could be operated by teams using only muscle power and determination. If they break through the orbital defenses, they'll find a planet that looks primitive, but fights with the fury of the desperate, Choi explained to his mixed force of human soldiers and alien volunteers. Every cave is a fortress. Every tunnel is a weapon. Every defender knows that retreat means the extinction of everything they love. The first enemy scouts entered the Sol system on a Tuesday morning. Long-range visual observers reported creatures unlike any they had encountered before. These were not the organic ships that had attacked other systems, but something that looked like living metal, fused with biological components. They've been adapting, reported Dr. Lee from her observation post, incorporating technology from every species they've consumed. Those ships are part machine, part creature, part something else entirely. Admiral Park gave the order to begin the first phase of Operation Primitive Storm. Hidden weapon platforms throughout the asteroid belt, activated using timing mechanisms based on mechanical clockwork. No electronic signals, no energy signatures, just precisely timed explosions that had been calculated months in advance. The creatures were caught completely off guard by attacks that seemed to come from empty space. Nuclear warheads launched from concealed positions using springs and compressed air. The explosions looked like natural phenomena until it was too late to avoid them. "First wave successful," reported Captain Kim as she watched enemy ships struggle to understand what was attacking them. They're scanning for energy weapons and finding nothing but chemical explosions and kinetic impacts. The creatures adapted quickly, developing shields against nuclear radiation and armor against kinetic weapons. But just as they countered the first wave of attacks, the second wave began. This time the weapons were completely different. Biological agents that infected their organic components with diseases from dozens of different worlds. "Third wave, launching," announced Major Choi as ground-based weapons joined the battle. Massive trebuchets hurled projectiles into orbit using nothing but counterweights and mechanical leverage. The projectiles contained antimatter charges that exploded among the confused enemy formations. For 6 hours, the plan worked perfectly. The creature's hive mind was overloaded trying to adapt to attacks that seemed to come from multiple species using incompatible technologies. Their coordination broke down as different groups developed different countermeasures for the same threat. But the enemy learned. They always learned. "Admiral, the creatures are changing tactics," reported Captain Kim as her sensors detected new movement patterns. "They're dividing into specialized groups. Some are countering our kinetic weapons, others are adapting to biological attacks, others are focusing on our chemical explosives." The hive mind had found a solution. Instead of trying to adapt every individual to every threat, they were creating specialist organisms designed to counter specific attack methods. The strategy that had confused them was now making them more efficient. "All ships, prepare for final phase," Park ordered. "Operation Last Stand is now in effect." The final phase was not a strategy but an act of desperation. Every human ship would ram enemy vessels while detonating nuclear charges. Every ground position would fight to the last. Defender. Every weapon would be fired until there was nothing left to fire. Captain Kim led the charge, her ship accelerating toward the largest enemy vessel at maximum speed. Around her, hundreds of other ships followed the same suicidal trajectory. This was not tactics or strategy. This was pure human determination, refusing to yield even in the face of certain death. The ramming attacks caused massive damage to the enemy fleet, but the cost was devastating. Of the 300 ships that began the battle, fewer than 50 survived the day. The creatures had learned to anticipate and counter even desperate attacks. But something unexpected happened during the final moments of the orbital battle. The largest creature, a command organism the size of a small moon, began consuming Earth's atmosphere to fuel its biological systems. Major Choi's ground teams hidden in deep tunnels activated the final trap. "All teams, initiate core charges," Choi ordered through mechanical communication systems. Deep beneath Earth's surface, nuclear weapons that had been planted months earlier began detonating in a carefully timed sequence. The explosions were not meant to destroy the planet but to crack its crust and release the molten core material in a controlled eruption. The command creature, in the process of consuming the planet's atmosphere, found itself also consuming superheated rock and radioactive metals ejected from Earth's interior. Its biological systems, designed to process technological materials, could not handle raw geological forces. The massive organism died in convulsions that shook the entire solar system. Its death sent shockwaves through the enemy fleet, disrupting their coordination and leaving smaller creatures confused and vulnerable. "This is our chance," shouted Captain Kim from her damaged ship. "All surviving vessels attack now while they're disoriented." The final battle lasted another 8 hours. Human ships using primitive weapons hunted confused creatures through the wreckage of the Sol system. By the end, fewer than a dozen enemy vessels escaped to carry news of the defeat back to their home regions. Earth survived, but at a terrible cost. The planet's surface was scarred by the geological weapons, its atmosphere contaminated by the battle. It would be centuries before the homeworld of humanity could support large populations again. "We won," Admiral Park announced to the surviving fleet. "But Earth is lost to us. We are a spacefaring species now, whether we chose to be or not." Dr. Lee analyzed the battle data and made one final discovery that changed everything. The creatures that escaped were not returning to attack again. They were fleeing in apparent terror, carrying a message that would spread throughout their entire species. Humanity is the first species to kill a command organism in direct combat, Lee reported. In their collective memory, we are now classified as something they fear. They've learned that consuming technological civilizations makes them stronger, but consuming humans makes them dead. As Part 5 ended, the galaxy was safe but changed forever. Humanity had saved galactic civilization by sacrificing their homeworld and proving that primitive weapons guided by intelligent tactics could defeat any enemy. The question now was whether the surviving species could build a new civilization that would never again become vulnerable to creatures that fed on technological advancement. 5 years had passed since the Battle of Earth, and Admiral Taemin Park stood on the observation deck of New Harmony Station, watching ships from 12 different species dock at the orbital facility. The station itself was a marvel of post-war engineering, built using hybrid technology that combined alien materials with human principles of simplicity and reliability. Construction report on the new colony ships? Park asked Captain Yeon-Soo Han, who now served as his chief of staff. 17 vessels completed this month, Han replied. Each one designed to support a mixed population of 5,000 individuals, using sustainable technology that won't attract attention from deep space. The galaxy had changed completely. Where once massive industrial centers had churned out sophisticated weapons and luxury goods, now smaller communities focused on creating tools that could be maintained for generations without requiring constant technological advancement. Dr. Hee-Jin Lee directed the Institute for Sustainable Sciences from her laboratory on the agricultural world of New Garden. Her research teams included representatives from every surviving species, working together to develop technologies that enhanced quality of life, without creating the energy signatures that had once attracted cosmic predators. We've successfully tested the new communication system, Lee reported during the monthly council meeting. Quantum entanglement paired with mechanical encryption allows instant communication between star systems without creating detectable signals. It's sophisticated science disguised as primitive engineering. The breakthrough represented everything the new galactic civilization stood for. Advanced scientific principles applied through simple, maintainable technology that looked unremarkable to any scanning system. It was progress disguised as primitivism. Engineer Ji-Ho Nam had become the chief architect of galactic reconstruction. His teams worked on hundreds of worlds, establishing manufacturing centers that could produce everything from starships to medical equipment, using methods that appeared centuries out of date, but incorporated cutting-edge scientific understanding. The key is hiding complexity behind simplicity, Nam explained to a group of new apprentices from 6 different species. A water wheel that generates electricity looks primitive, but if the components are precisely engineered using modern materials, science, it can power an entire city without creating energy signatures that travel beyond the local system. Captain So-Ra Kim commanded the New Horizons, flagship of the reformed Galactic Defense Force. Her ship represented the perfect balance between human tactical thinking and alien engineering capability. From the outside, it looked like a simple, metal vessel that could have been built centuries earlier. Inside, it contained the most sophisticated equipment the galaxy could produce. Patrol report from Sector 7, Kim announced during the fleet briefing. No signs of creature activity, but we've detected 3 new refugee groups from beyond the galactic rim. Apparently, word of our victory is spreading to other galaxies. The refugees brought stories of civilizations that had heard about humanity's defeat of the creatures. Species from distant galaxies were beginning to seek out the primitive fighters who had accomplished what advanced civilizations could not. Earth's children had become legendary across multiple galaxies. Major Dong-Wook Choi ran the new military academy on the world of New Sparta. Students came from across known space to learn human combat techniques and tactical thinking. The curriculum included everything from sword fighting to nuclear strategy, emphasizing adaptability and the use of simple tools to accomplish complex objectives. Today we practice the siege of Alpha Station, Choi announced to his mixed class of human cadets and alien students. Remember, the objective is not to use the most advanced weapon available, The objective is to use the most effective weapon that your enemy cannot adapt to counter. The exercises had become famous throughout the galaxy. Students learned to fight using stone weapons and chemical explosives, but also studied advanced physics and xenobiology. The combination produced officers who could command star fleets using tactics that no sophisticated enemy could predict or counter. Ambassador Yuna Shin worked from the new diplomatic center on Nexus Prime, helping to establish the new galactic compact. The agreement limited technological development while ensuring that scientific knowledge was preserved for future generations. It was the most complex constitutional document ever written, disguised as a simple trade agreement. The key principle is sustainable progress, Shin explained to representatives from newly contacted species. We advance our knowledge and capabilities, but we do it in ways that don't create the signatures that attract cosmic predators. We've learned that survival requires wisdom, not just intelligence. The compact established technology review boards for every member species. New inventions had to be evaluated not just for their usefulness, but for their potential to attract unwanted attention from creatures that fed on technological sophistication. Some discoveries were quietly shelved until safer implementation methods could be developed. Dr. Lee made a discovery that changed their understanding of the war they had fought. Deep analysis of creature remains revealed that they were not the apex predators of the universe, but were themselves fleeing from something even more dangerous in the spaces between galaxies. We didn't just defeat them, Lee announced to the Emergency Science Council. We scared them so badly that they've retreated to warn others of their kind about humanity. In their collective memory, we represent something they've never encountered before. A species that becomes more dangerous when forced to fight with primitive weapons. The implications were staggering. Humanity had not just won a war. They had established themselves as the one species in known space that cosmic predators actively avoided. The galaxy was safer not because the creatures were gone, but because they were afraid to return. Engineer Nam's greatest achievement was the completion of New Earth, a world terraformed using techniques that appeared to be simple agriculture, but incorporated advanced climate science and ecological engineering. The planet looked like a primitive farming world, but could support billions of inhabitants in sustainable comfort. It's not about going backward, Nam explained to visitors touring the agricultural centers. It's about going forward in a direction that looks backward to anyone who might be watching from deep space. Children played in fields that doubled as camouflaged manufacturing centers. Barns contained workshops that could build starship components using tools that looked like they belonged in a museum. Schools taught advanced mathematics through games that appeared to be simple folk traditions. Captain Kim led the first expedition to Earth in 5 years, part of the long-term project to restore humanity's birth world. The planet was slowly healing from the damage of the final battle, but it would be decades before it could support large populations again. The memorial sites are complete, Kim reported from Earth's surface. Every defender who died in the Battle of Sol is remembered, along with representatives from every species that supported the defense. It's not just a monument to human sacrifice, but to galactic cooperation. The memorial complex was built using the same hybrid technology that characterized the new civilization. Simple stone monuments that contained quantum storage devices preserving the memories and knowledge of the fallen. Future generations would be able to access detailed historical records simply by touching carved symbols on ancient-looking stone tablets. Major Choi established the final element of galactic defense, the Observer Corps. These were teams of specially trained individuals from every species who would monitor deep space for signs of new threats while appearing to be nothing more than primitive astronomers studying the stars. We're not looking for invasions or attacks, Choi explained to the new observer recruits. We're looking for patterns that indicate species in other regions are developing technologies that might attract cosmic predators. Our job is to warn them before it's too late. The Observer Corps used telescopes that appeared to be simple optical devices but incorporated detection systems capable of analyzing energy signatures across multiple galaxies. They were humanity's gift to the universe. Early warning systems disguised as harmless curiosity about the stars. Ambassador Shin presided over the 5th anniversary celebration of the Battle of Sol, an event that had become a galaxy-wide holiday, celebrating the victory of determination over sophistication. Representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered to share stories and renew their commitment to sustainable progress. We learned that advancement without wisdom leads to extinction, Shin told the assembled delegates. But we also learned that primitive weapons guided by intelligent strategy can defeat any enemy. We are stronger now than we were when we had the most advanced technology in the galaxy. The celebration included demonstrations of combat techniques that had become art forms, exhibitions of hybrid technology that looked like folk crafts, and performances of historical recreations that taught tactical principles through entertainment. The sixth part concluded, the galaxy had found a new balance between progress and survival. Humanity had not just saved galactic civilization, they had taught it a better way to grow and develop. The stars once again